Welcome back. You're watching 101. We're talking with Mary Robinson, former Irish President and UN High Commissioner on Human Rights and founder of Realising Rights. Your political career actually began at an early age, and as we've discussed, a young Catholic woman elected into the Senate in 1969, a time when it was very unusual. You were against the odds then, and you went on even as a president of Ireland against the odds. Is it something you've had to sort of constantly challenge and face?
Well, I certainly recognise that none of it was planned in the way that it sounds. When I came back from studying in the Harvard Law School, I joke, but there's some truth in it, that I had Harvard Law School arrogance in the Ireland of the time. So when election came about, I said, why is it always elderly male professors who go up for these Senate seats? And my friend said, well, if you go forward. And so it was almost that accidental. I hadn't thought about it in advance. Even less did I think, after 20 years in the Irish Senate and having actually retired from the Senate to practice law, not just in the Irish courts, but in the European courts. And I was very happy doing that. I was approached to see would I seek a nomination as president. And my initial response was, no, not really, because the non-executive president of Ireland is quite a kind of diplomatic position. It's not one of political power. It has important constitutional powers, but you've got to link with the primary role of the Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, and his government. And it had been very remote from people's lives for quite some time. But when I went back to the Constitution as a constitutional lawyer, I said, this office is elected by the people. It should be closer to the people. So it was for purpose that I allowed myself to go forward. And I thought initially, I'll make the argument for a more relevant presidency. But as I was making the argument, I found that people were very receptive.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about the backlash you faced, and you've mentioned this already, the fact that you did get hate mail, you've had a lot of criticism, especially the controversial issues you've taken on, from contraception to gay rights, women's rights, and so on. How have you personally coped with that backlash?
The worst time was the first time at the age of 25 when I was so criticised by bishops. My parents were agonised as practising Catholics. I was receiving this hate mail, and I really did kind of wobble a little bit, and I was steadied not least by marrying during that period and having a very broad-shouldered husband, but we both admit that we made a mistake. He decided to destroy most of the hate mail, and we should have kept it as a record of what was happening in Irish society.
You came to Harvard originally in 1969, I think it was, 1967, no, sorry, yes. 67 you came, and it was during the Vietnam War era, as that was all gearing up. How did that shape your view of the nation and the people here?
It certainly deeply shaped my own thinking. I was fortunate enough to spend that year, I'm the class of 68, in a Harvard Law School like the other law schools, which was examining the morality of the Vietnam War. Many of my colleagues were planning to go into the civil rights movement in the South. Midway through the year, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Before the end, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. So you can imagine that time of moral questioning, of looking at the role of law, the importance of the rule of law, the morality of war. Many of the issues that we're now thinking about in the post-9/11 world. So it affected me deeply, and I felt very encouraged by the individual Americans, as I still do now here in New York and traveling a lot within the United States. There's such a difference between individual Americans and what a current administration may be doing in the name of America that's causing a lot of anxiety around the world.
And of course, it's an administration that sort of resisted you staying on in the United Nations.
I recognized that immediately after the terrible attacks of 9/11, when I came to New York, that the trauma felt in the United States was much greater because they had thought they were immune from that kind of attack. I had grown up in Ireland with the problems of Northern Ireland. We'd seen the problems in Britain and British cities. I knew of the problems when I was studying in France of Algeria. We had problems in Paris when I was a young student. I knew of problems in many cities of the world, and more recently in Spain, example. And there isn't that total sense of the trauma of having been immune. So that, to me, explains some of the immediate measures. And I knew, as High Commissioner, and I was High Commissioner for exactly a year after those terrible attacks. My last day in office was the 11th of September 2002, and my last event was a religious ceremony in the cathedral in Geneva, marking the first anniversary. But I knew I had to criticize the United States for what it was doing in opening Guantanamo Bay, not complying with the Geneva Conventions, and then being ambiguous about torture, because I was seeing the knock-on effect of this. I was seeing other countries saying, but the standards have changed. And I would say, no, I'm the High Commissioner, they have not changed. And they would say, look at the United States. So not only was it not good within the United States, but it was having a very bad knock-on effect in other countries.
It sounds like the war on terror, as it's labelled, it goes against everything you're trying to do in terms of create better human rights globally.
That's right, and I'm very glad that both within the United States and internationally, there's a recognition we have to rebalance again. Too much slipped on the side of emphasis on security and forget about the rule of law and human rights. We've paid a very bitter price for that. And now the American Bar Association, the International Bar Association, many individual members of Congress and et cetera are all standing up for reasserting that balance.
So your biggest success, what would that be?
I don't know, sometimes success is really for others to judge. Maybe for me, I'm so lucky that I wake up every morning looking forward to what I'm doing in the day with my colleagues. And it involves a lot of travel and that's tiring and things, but I really love what I'm doing. I'm lucky, I have a wonderful family. And I do now feel even more energized having become a grandmother. When I see my two lucky Irish grandchildren in a family context where they're safe, where they will have a reasonable lifestyle, etc. And I know that, for goodness sake, 30,000 children under 5 die every single day of preventable disease. That's a silent tsunami of children every week, children under 5. That's more than 50 silent. I mean, our world is not addressing the real issues as human beings. If we don't put right to health, right to food, safe water, human security, not just terrorism, state security, but human security, right up there as a priority, we're just not living up to our human potential.
Okay, so through the things you've done, you've got the connections in business, politics, diplomacy, activism, and everything else. How can you use those tools most effectively?
One other way in which I'm trying to do it is actually women's leadership. I personify it for a lot of people. I'm very happy to do that. And I'm trying to encourage different ways of exercising that leadership. We have a business women's initiative on HIV and AIDS, for example, bringing powerful business women to realize that AIDS nowadays has a woman's face, a young girl's face in sub-Saharan Africa. We have a Women Leaders Intercultural Forum, which has just been launched, which is bringing women together inter-regionally, interculturally, and also between the generations. And I have a lot of friends in different parts of the Muslim world, for example, but we're also linking people in Latin America, talking about issues under a broad frame of human security. But we're talking about economic empowerment of women. We're talking about violence against women. We're talking about migration. And we're not going to stay talking women among ourselves. We're going to bring our collective voice to the wider arena, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations itself. I mean, just not have one token woman giving a keynote speech or something, but actually say, we women have discussed this and we have our vision and we want our voices heard. And we want the younger women to have their voices heard.
Are you trying to shout over what is really a chorus of clash of cultures at the moment? Do you feel there is that?
We want to say we have nothing to do with that because we know in the different regions women have far more in common. It's often combating in different ways, different kinds of patriarchal society. It's combating the neo-Christian right in the United States, as there is an Islamic extremism, and they actually meet together at world conferences, as I found when I was High Commissioner. They're the ones that are trying to stop progress in the UN Special Session on HIV and AIDS, not to mention the vulnerable groups, like men having sex with men, sex workers, etc. They're in an unholy alliance, these religious groups at the extremes.
Kind of ironic, really. Yeah.
It is ironic.
So you personally, though, you're obviously not going to slow down with all your activism, and that's great because you're obviously very good at it. What do you want to do personally for yourself, though? What things haven't you done in your life that you'd like to achieve?
I'd like to read a lot more of the books that are sitting in my home in the west of Ireland. I do feel sometimes that I don't read as much as I would like to because it's a great way of resourcing inside. There's a lot of giving out in the sense of speaking, convening, travelling, meeting. But that being said, I find I have a quick capacity to take a complete holiday, and I'm fortunate enough to have family and friends. So on the first morning I wake up on holiday, I forget all the work issues, and so that helps. But I would like to read some of the wonderful thinking that's going on. There's a great book that Amartya Sen has just brought out that I've had beside my bed for about 3 weeks, and I'm hoping I'll have more time to read that kind of work.
And we've talked about your frustrations, the successes and so on. What would you like your legacy to be? What do you think your legacy will be?
That's really hard to say. I am a very rooted person as an Irish person. I'm very rooted in the west of Ireland. Our home is very near to where I was born. And I hope that what I've been doing is real to those growing up now in the modern Ireland, and that they see that we're very fortunate. We've gone through the whole cycle of struggle for freedom, of a terrible famine and dispersal of people, of the long road to an independence, and then being part of a European Union very successfully. So a small country in a wider grouping of states. And I'm hoping that young Irish people won't become selfish as they become richer, that we'll keep that heritage. And if I can help to do that, I'd be happy with that as a legacy.
Mary Robinson, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.